If you're an investor, you put capital into a company for one ultimate reason, right? Return.
Exactly.
You want your money back and you want growth. And, the most tangible, most satisfying sign of that success isn't just seeing the stock price go up.
Oh no, it's getting that cash payout.
The dividend. It's that moment the company says, yes, we made a profit and here is your share.
It is the shareholders' reward, absolutely. I mean, it is a distribution of profits, a really measurable return on that initial investment.
But it's not that simple, is it?
Not at all. If you ever sat in a corporate law class or just tried to understand the fine print of an annual report, you know this payout is, well, it's anything but simple. Declaring and paying out profits is governed by this dense web of legal statutes. And they're designed not only to reward you, but critically, to protect the very financial stability of the company itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that financial and legal tension. We have this intensive stack of source material today. It's essentially a detailed roadmap through corporate law,
Specifically, sections 123 through 127.
all dedicated to dividends. So our mission today is to act as your expert guide, to translate these, let's be honest, kind of dry statutes into clear, actionable knowledge.
Yeah, we're transforming this into a focused tutorial. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding the precise guardrails that dictate corporate payouts.
And by the time we are done with this deep dive, you'll know the exact legal provisions that govern a declaration.
You'll know the highly restrictive conditions a company has to meet if they need to dip into reserves during a bad year,
The whole timeline for claiming your money.
right down to how long it sits in the unpaid dividend account, or UDA, before it gets moved to the National Fund, the IEPF.
And crucially, you'll know the severe, even criminal consequences directors face if they break these rules.
So to start, we need a solid foundation.
A clear definition. When the law talks about a dividend, what precisely does that term cover?
Well, Section 235 gives us a pretty straightforward definition. It's a distribution of sums to members out of profits, or, if it's authorized, out of available free reserves.
Okay, so it's broad.
It is, but the key insight here is this. It's the allocation of distributable profits. It's money that becomes payable to shareholders the moment it's declared. And, importantly, the legal definition explicitly includes the interim dividend.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just the big end-of-year payout.
Nope, it treats both interim and final payouts under the same, umbrella of scrutiny.
All right, let's start with the hierarchy of declaration. This is a central concept in corporate governance, right? Under Section 123.
It is.
When it comes to setting the dividend rate, who actually holds the power here? Is it the board of directors or is it the shareholders?
It's a very deliberate system of checks and balances. The process has to start with the board. It must.
Why them?
They're the management team. They understand the cash flow, the liabilities, the projected needs of the company. Their role is to assess the financial health and then recommend a dividend rate.
And that recommendation is formalized.
Yes, it's included in the board's report, as detailed in Section 134T.
And then the shareholders, the owners, they meet at the annual general meeting, the AGM, and formally declare it.
That's right, via an ordinary resolution. That's the declaration of the final dividend.
But here's the part that always gets me.
There's a fascinating constraint, isn't there?
A huge one. It's codified in regulations like Clause 80 of Table F.
And it often surprises people who are new to corporate law. While the shareholders have the ultimate power to approve the dividend, they are fundamentally restricted.
How so?
They cannot declare a dividend rate higher than what the board of directors originally recommended.
Wait, isn't that a massive limitation on shareholder democracy? I mean, if the board is being overly cautious, let's say, and the shareholders feel the company could easily afford a 20% payout instead of the 15% the board recommended, they have zero legal recourse to increase that rate.
That's absolutely right. The board effectively sets the ceiling.
And the logic there is what? Financial prudence?
Exactly. The law views the board as having superior fiduciary knowledge of the company's capital preservation needs, its debt obligations, all its operational requirements.
So if shareholders tried to pass a resolution for a higher rate,
As we see in example 2 of our sources,
it's just invalid.
completely invalid under Regulation 80. The law is very firm on this. A dividend is not a debt, it's not a liability, until the rate recommended by the directors is formally approved by the shareholders at a valid meeting.
That really puts the brakes on any, short-term shareholder greed. It prioritizes stability.
It does.
Okay, let's tackle a critical element of the calculation. People often see a stock trading for hundreds of dollars and assume the dividend percentage applies to that high market price.
A very common assumption.
Why is that fundamentally wrong in the eyes of the law?
Because a dividend is a return on the capital that was originally subscribed, not the market's speculative valuation of the company. Dividend is always calculated as a proportion of the nominal or face value of the share.
The market price is totally irrelevant for this calculation. Totally.
Let's walk through the math with example 1 to really solidify this. We have a company, AB Ltd. Their share has a face value of 10 rupees.
Right, but the market price is 250 rupees.
And an investor holds 1,000 shares, which they might have bought for even more, say 300 rupees per share. If the company declares a 20% dividend, what does that investor actually receive?
Okay, so the investor calculates 20% at the constant, which is the face value of 10 rupees.
So 2 rupees a share.
2 rupees a share. So for their 1,000 shares, the total payout is 2,000 rupees. It doesn't matter that the market price is 250 or that they bought in high at 300. This calculation anchors the dividend to the legal and structural capital basis of the company.
That's a perfect illustration of how the law just separates the financial reality of the company from the volatility of the trading floor.
It has to.
Now, let's categorize dividends based on timing. We have interim and final. What sets the interim dividend apart? The key distinction is the authority that declares it. An interim dividend, which is covered under Section 123, subsections 3 and 4, is declared solely by the board of directors.
They don't need shareholder approval for this one.
Nope. They can do it at any time between the closure of the previous financial year and the next AGM. It's kind of like the mid-year bonus based on current ongoing performance.
And where can the funds for this mid-year payout be sourced from?
The sources are very clearly defined. It can be the surplus in the profit and loss account, profits generated during the current financial year, or, more specifically, profits generated up to the quarter preceding the date the board declares the dividend.
Okay, but what if the company is bleeding money? What if they've incurred a loss up to that preceding quarter? This is where the law steps in with a crucial safeguard, right?
It does, a big one. If the company incurred a loss, the board can't just decide on a high rate to reassure the market. The interim dividend rate is strictly limited.
And the limit is?
It cannot exceed the average rate declared during the immediately preceding 3 financial years.
So, using example 3 from our sources, if a company has an average historical rate of 16% over the last 3 years, and they are currently experiencing losses, their hands are tied.
Their hands are tied. They're restricted to a maximum of 16% for that interim dividend.
That's a capital protection measure.
Absolutely. It prevents the board from making an irresponsibly large, loss-fueled interim payout that might severely compromise the company's long-term liquidity or its reserve balances.
And speaking of liquidity, once that interim dividend is declared, the board faces a non-negotiable deadline.
A very tight one. The declared amount must be deposited into a separate designated account in a scheduled bank within 5 days of the declaration.
5 days. That's an incredibly swift turnaround time. That's about segregating the cash instantly.
Precisely. It secures the funds for the shareholders immediately. The final dividend, by contrast, is the formal commitment.
Declared by the shareholders at the AGM based on the final audited accounts.
And as we already established, the shareholders can only ratify or reduce the rate recommended by the board.
Now, what about the ultimate distinction between the two, which really speaks to their legal standing? The ability to revoke. Can a company just take back a declared dividend?
Well, once a final dividend is declared by the shareholders, it creates a binding debt obligation from the company to the members. So it cannot be revoked.
It's a debt.
It's a debt. An interim dividend, on the other hand, since it's declared only by the board, is technically revocable, but only if the company manages to secure the consent of all shareholders.
Which is practically impossible in any large organization.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving beyond timing, let's categorize dividends based on the type of share. Preference versus equity. This really defines the priority queue for payouts.
It does. Preference shares, which are governed by Section 43, are all about priority. Preference shareholders are assured of a preferential dividend at a fixed rate, and their payments must be fully satisfied before a single rupee goes to the equity holders.
And within that group, the nature of the protection really hinges on whether they're cumulative or non-cumulative.
Right. Cumulative preference shares are the strongest safety net. If profits are insufficient, the unpaid dividends just accumulate as arrears.
So they roll over.
They roll over year after year. And equity shareholders are completely barred from receiving a dividend until every single cent of those cumulative arrears has been paid off.
And non-cumulative is the opposite, I assume?
It is. Non-cumulative preference shares only entitle the holder to a dividend in the specific year a profit is declared. If the company skips a payout, the right to that year's dividend lapses entirely. There's no accumulation of arrears.
Which brings us to the equity shares.
They are the residual claimants. Their dividend rate is flexible and relies entirely on the company's discretion and, most importantly, on the remaining profits after the fixed rights of all the preference shareholders have been fully discharged.
We've established who declares the dividend and when. Now let's move to the absolute core. Where does the law permit the cash to come from? This is Section 123, defining distributable profit.
This section is really the cornerstone of capital integrity. The law only trusts 4 permitted sources for a dividend distribution, and all of them boil down to realized, auditable profit, or guaranteed funds.
What are those 4 pillars?
First, the profits of the current financial year, but only after you've properly accounted for depreciation.
Okay.
Second, the profits of any previous financial year, provided they remain undistributed and are sitting as free reserves, and again, only after accounting for previous depreciation.
And the third?
A combination of the first 2. And fourth, any money provided by the central or a state government under a specific guarantee for the purpose of paying that dividend.
I want to focus on that first absolute mandate, depreciation. Why is providing for depreciation as per Section 123(2) and Schedule 2 an absolute legal precursor to declaring a dividend?
It's the law's way of enforcing capital preservation. Dividend must never come from capital. It can only come from revenue profits. Depreciation is the non-cash charge that accounts for the reduction in value of your long-term assets, your factory, your machinery, due to usage or obsolescence.
So if a company just skips this step, what's the risk the law is trying to mitigate here?
They risk overstating their profits and, critically, overstating their asset base. If a company pays out all its reported profits without setting aside funds for asset replacement, they are, in effect, distributing capital.
You're paying out the value of your machines.
Exactly. The law is looking ahead. In 5 years, that machinery will need replacing, or the company might face winding up. If the company has depleted its capital base by distributing these unrealistically high profits, it won't have the funds to continue operating or satisfy its creditors. It's a mechanism to ensure long-term, sustainable viability.
That reframes depreciation from just an accounting chore into a legal capital preservation mandate.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, now let's define what profits are not distributable. This brings us to the definition of free reserves.
Right, Section 243 defines free reserves as what is available for dividend distribution on the latest audited balance sheet. But the law is equally clear about the negative, what must be excluded because it represents, paper wells or non-cash assets.
So which types of gains are barred from being used for dividends?
This list is very strict. It includes unrealized gains and notional gains. It also strictly bars any profit resulting from the revaluation of assets and any change in the carrying amount of an asset or liability recognized in equity at fair value.
Can you help me understand the rationale for barring revaluation profits? I mean, if a company owns a piece of land that has genuinely skyrocketed in value, why can't they use that increase to reward shareholders?
Because the gain isn't realized cash from operations. Look at example 4 in our sources, Shreyas Mechanics Limited.
Right.
They have 24 lakh rupees in actual free reserves, but they also have a 20 lakh rupee profit because they revalued their land.
And the board wants to use it.
The board might be very keen to use that extra 20 lakh to pay a massive dividend, but the law prohibits it. That 20 lakh is an unrealized gain. It's just locked on the balance sheet until the land is actually sold for cash.
So allowing its distribution would mean paying cash out of reserves based on a theoretical paper increase.
Which weakens the company's actual cash reserves. It's a vital safeguard against distributing phantom wealth.
And before the company even looks at these reserves, it also has to clear out any old baggage, right?
Absolutely. Note 1 specifies that before declaring any dividend, the company must follow a strict cleanup rule. Any carried over previous losses and any depreciation not provided for in previous years must be fully set off against the current year's profit.
You have to settle the past before you celebrate the present.
That's a good way to put it.
Finally, before they declare a final dividend, is a company required to transfer a certain amount of profit into its reserves?
This is a point of common confusion. The answer is no. Transferring profits to reserves is entirely at the discretion of the company. The law does not mandate a minimum percentage that must be transferred.
So, using the examples from our source material, Alma Watches wants to transfer 15%, which is more than their historical average.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bricks Shipyards, with $1 billion in profit, decides to transfer nothing at all. Both of those are legally allowed to do that.
Yes. Alma Watches is free to transfer any portion the board deems prudent, and Brick Shipyards is perfectly justified in not transferring any amount to reserves before proposing a dividend, as long as they comply with all the other mandatory provisions like depreciation and loss set-off.
So the quantum of the transfer to general reserves is a policy decision, not a legal mandate.
Exactly.
This brings us to Section 3, which is, I would say, arguably the most complex and restrictive section of all. This is the contingency plan.
It really is.
When current year profits are absent, a company might still want to maintain market confidence by paying a dividend from its accumulated reserves. But this is where the law truly throws up an obstacle course.
That's the perfect description, an obstacle course. This is Rule 3 of the company's rules, 2014. And this structure exists solely to prevent the erosion of the company's financial core during tough times.
So a company can only pay a dividend from its free reserves if what?
If 4 separate, stringent, and interdependent conditions are all satisfied. If you fail just one of these tests, the whole distribution is barred.
Let's start with the first restriction, which relates to signaling stability. Condition I, the rate of dividend restriction.
The law wants consistency. If you're paying out of your reserves, the rate you declare cannot exceed the simple average rate of dividend you declared during the immediately preceding 3 financial years.
So it's a simple formula.
Very simple. The new rate has to be less than or equal to the sum of the last 3 years' rates divided by 3.
But if the company is brand new or hasn't paid a dividend for years, this constraint is lifted.
Correct. If the company hasn't declared any dividend in the preceding 3 financial years, there's no historical average to benchmark against, so this specific restriction doesn't apply.
Okay, now we get to the core financial constraints. Condition 2 and 3. These determine the maximum pool of cash they can even touch in the reserves.
Condition 2 is the maximum withdrawal limit. The total amount you draw from your accumulated profits cannot exceed 10% of the sum of the company's paid-up share capital plus its free reserves.
Using the latest audited figures, of course.
Of course. That 10% figure is the absolute ceiling of the raid you can perform on your reserves.
So 10% of the capital base is the maximum they can access, and then Condition 3 immediately dictates the priority for that withdrawn cash.
Yes. The moment you pull that cash out, Condition 3 mandates that it must first be utilized to set off any losses incurred in the financial year in which the dividend is being declared.
You have to neutralize the current loss first.
You must. Only the residue, the cash that's left after covering the loss, can be used to fund the equity dividend.
And Condition 4 ensures they don't leave the cupboard bare.
This is the ultimate backstop. The minimum reserve balance. After the withdrawal, that is, after covering the loss and paying the dividend, the balance remaining in the free reserves cannot fall below 15% of the company's total paid-up share capital.
So you have to maintain a core emergency fund.
A safety margin, exactly.
That is a highly detailed set of sequential hoops to jump through. Let's take our time and walk through Illustration 3, Capricorn Industries, step by step, to see how these restrictions combine to choke the potential payout.
This example is critical for understanding the restrictiveness of Rule 3. Let's set the scene. Capricorn Industries has a paid-up capital of 200 lakh rupees and accumulated reserves of 240 lakh rupees.
But they've suffered a massive loss of 30 lakh rupees this year.
Right. And historically, their dividend rates were 9%, 10%, and 12%.
Okay, step 1, the average rate ceiling, Condition I.
So we averaged the last 3 rates, 9 plus 10 plus 12 divided by 3, which is 10.33%. Based on their 200 lakh rupee paid-up capital, the maximum dividend quantum based on rate alone is 10.33% of 200 lakh, or 20.6 lakh rupees. That's our theoretical maximum.
Step 2, the 10% withdrawal limit and the loss set-off requirement. Conditions 2 and 3. This is where things get interesting because we have to cover that loss first.
Right. The total base for the 10% calculation is paid-up capital, 200 lakh, plus free reserves, 240 lakh, which sums to 440 lakh.
10% of that is 44 lakh.
44 lakh rupees. This is the absolute maximum cash they can withdraw from the reserves.
So they pull out 44 lakh. Now they must immediately use that cash to cover the current loss of 30 lakh.
Exactly. So 44 lakh, the maximum withdrawal, minus the 30 lakh required loss set-off, leaves us with only 14 lakh rupees available to pay the actual dividend.
Wow.
This figure 14 lakh becomes the new hard ceiling for the payout, and it's dramatically lower than the 20.6 lakh they could have theoretically paid based on the average rate alone.
the law just intervened and cut the potential dividend by a third to protect the company's solvency.
It did. The quantum is restricted by the set-off requirement. Now for step 3, the minimum reserve balance test, condition 4. We have to ensure that after we made the withdrawal and paid the loss in the dividend, the remaining reserves are sufficient.
Okay, starting reserves were 240 lakh. They used 30 lakh for the loss and 14 lakh for the dividend.
So 240 lakh minus the total withdrawal of 44 lakh leaves a remaining reserve balance of 196 lakh rupees.
And the minimum required.
The minimum requirement is 15% of the paid-up capital of 200 lakh, which is 30 lakh rupees. Since 196 lakh is vastly greater than the required 30 lakh, condition 4 is satisfied.
So the conclusion here is powerful. Despite the potential to pay 20.6 lakh, the restriction of the loss set off under Rule 3 limits the company to a maximum payout of 14 lakh.
Which translates to a maximum dividend rate of only 7%. It's the lowest of all 3 possible ceilings that dictates the final payout. This example perfectly illustrates how Rule 3 acts as the ultimate corporate safeguard.
It prioritizes neutralizing current losses and preserving a minimum capital buffer over maintaining a historical dividend rate.
It has to.
And before we move on, a final note. Rule 3 is so restrictive because it applies to normal commercial entities. It generally doesn't apply to a government company, right?
Correct. Where the entire paid-up capital is held by the central or state governments, the government's backing provides a financial safety net that renders these specific reserve constraints unnecessary.
We've established the source and the calculation. Now let's look at the operational challenge. Getting that cash into the shareholders' hands and the strict clock the law imposes. We already noted the extremely swift requirement under Section 123, 4 days to deposit the declared amount into a separate account.
That 5-day segregation is absolutely vital. The dividend cash has to be ring-fenced immediately.
So if the AGM declares the dividend on September 24th, as in example 5,
the cash must be sitting safely in that separate scheduled bank account by September 29th. This protects the dividend funds from any immediate operational creditor claims.
Okay, now, who is the rightful recipient? Section 1123, 5A, says it must be paid only to the registered shareholder, his order, or his banker. The word registered is key, isn't it? Especially during share transfers.
Absolutely. The company pays the person who is listed in its register of members on the designated cutoff date. If a purchaser of shares hasn't been formally entered into that register, they have no claim unless the original registered holder authorizes the payment in writing.
And this issue comes up frequently, like in illustration 5 involving Binoy and Mohan.
A classic case.
Binoy sells the shares to Mohan. The company declares the dividend on September 3rd, but the record date, the date used to determine eligibility, was September 7th. Mohan's name was entered into the register before that record date, so who gets the cash?
Mohan is the rightful recipient. Since the register of members showed Mohan's name on the record date of September 7th, he is the shareholder of record entitled to the payment.
Regardless of the previous ownership or the declaration date.
The record date is the legal moment of truth.
Now, Section 123, 5B covers the mode of payment. It has to be monetary, though that doesn't strictly mean physical currency anymore.
Right. Payment must be made in cash, meaning monetary value, but the medium is flexible. It can be a check, a dividend warrant, or any electronic mode. And here's the second critical deadline. The payment must be paid or the warrant posted within 30 days from the date of declaration.
Miss this deadline and severe penalties apply.
Very severe.
What about bonus shares? This is the one instance where it seems profit leaves the company without being cash.
It's the only exception, but it comes with a massive caveat. A company can capitalize its profits or reserves to issue fully paid-up bonus shares or pay up unpaid amounts on existing shares. However, the law insists that bonus shares cannot be issued in lieu of dividend. They are distinct financial instruments. You can't tell shareholders, hey, we decided not to pay the dividend this year, but here are some bonus shares instead. They're separate transactions.
We should also briefly mention the specific modification for NITIs, the mutual benefit companies.
Yes. For NITIs, if a cash dividend remains unclaimed within the standard 30-day window, they have the flexibility to discharge that liability by simply crediting the member's account. It modifies the strict cash or warrant requirement for those specific institutions.
Okay, finally, let's address the absolute legal prohibition on declaration under Section 123(6). Beyond not having enough legal profit, when is a company completely barred from declaring any dividend?
The law severely penalizes companies that default on their public obligations. The first prohibition is crystal clear. if a company fails to comply with provisions related to public deposits. So, accepting deposits under Section 73 or repaying old deposits under Section 74.
Then well.
It is barred from declaring any dividend on its equity shares for the entire duration of that failure.
That's a fundamental prioritization. Creditor protection trumps shareholder reward.
Absolutely. The law places debt obligations to the public higher than voluntary payouts to the owners.
And the second prohibition.
It applies to Section 8 companies. These are companies established for charitable purposes, promoting art, science, commerce, and so on. They are strictly prohibited from paying any dividend to their members. All profits must be plowed back solely into promoting the company's objectives.
Okay, the 30-day clock has run out and the payment didn't reach the shareholder. Maybe the warrant was lost or the bank details were wrong. This triggers the process of segregating the cash into the unpaid dividend account, or UDA, under Section 124.
The UDA is the company's temporary holding tank. The critical time frame here starts immediately after that initial 30 days for payment expires.
And the company has a secondary, very small window.
A tiny one. Within 7 days after that 30-day period expires, the total unpaid or unclaimed dividend amount must be transferred to the UDA, which is a dedicated, separate account in a scheduled bank.
And if they miss this 7-day deadline for transferring the money to the UDA,
that attracts a penalty, but it's one that directly benefits the shareholder. Failure to transfer the amount results in the company paying interest at a rate of 12% per annum from the date the transfer should have been made.
And that 12% is payable to the members whose funds were delayed.
That's right.
This is fascinating. The 12% interest for late transfer into the UDA is lower than the 18% penalty we'll discuss later for late payment generally. That suggests the law sees non-segregation as less severe than an outright failure to pay.
Precisely. The funds are still inside the company, potentially exposed, but they haven't been lost to the member entirely.
And the law demands transparency once the money is in the UDA.
It does. Within 90 days of that transfer, the company must publish a detailed statement online listing names, addresses, and amounts owed on both the company website and a central government-approved website. This gives the shareholder a chance to discover they are owed money.
And during this holding period, they can apply directly back to the company to claim the funds from the UDA. But the clock is still ticking. If the money sits in the UDA for too long, it leaves the company entirely and moves to the National Trust Fund,
the Investor Education and Protection Fund, or IEPF, under Section 125.
And what's the trigger for that?
The transfer to the IEPS is the final step, triggered after a long holding period, 7 years from the date the money was transferred to the UDA. If it remains unpaid or unclaimed for 7 full years, the company must transfer the principal amount and any accrued interest to the IEPF.
And this is where the share ownership itself becomes vulnerable, correct?
Yes, that's a crucial modern protection. All shares corresponding to that dividend. So shares for which the dividend has not been paid or claimed for 7 consecutive years or more must also be transferred into the name of the IEPF authority.
That's a big deal.
It is, but the law is meticulous here. If the investor claimed or was paid a dividend for any single year within that 7-year period, the continuity is broken and the shares are protected from transfer.
But the original owner doesn't lose the right to the wealth.
No, not at all. The system is designed as a trust. The original claimant retains the right to reclaim both the transferred money and the shares from the IEPF. They just have to follow the prescribed procedure and submit it to the IEPF authority.
Let's briefly detail the scope of the IEPF. It's an active fund used for investor protection. What other revenue streams flow into this fund besides old dividends?
The IEPF is designed to capture all long-term unclaimed corporate balances. So besides the UDA money and interest, it includes previous balances transferred under the Old Companies Act, grants from the government, donations, and critically, all other corporate balances that have been unclaimed for 7 years.
Like what?
Mature deposits and debentures, unclaimed application money for securities, and all the interest accrued on these amounts.
And I noticed the source material highlights the inclusion of funds received through disgorgement.
That's a key element of its investor protection role. Disgorgement is the legally enforced repayment of ill-gotten gains by financial wrongdoers, often recovered through a court order. Those funds are funneled into the IEPF. It shows the fund's mandate goes way beyond just lost checks.
So how is the fund actually utilized? What happens to all that accumulated capital?
The utilization is highly targeted under Section 125(3). The primary use is, of course, the refund of all those unclaimed amounts, dividends, deposits, debentures to the eligible claimants.
But it's also used for education.
Extensively. for promoting investor education, awareness, and protection activities.
And what about those recovered crime proceeds?
The fund is used for the distribution of those disgorged amounts to the identifiable applicants, shareholders, or depositors who suffered losses due to the illegal actions, as dictated by court orders.
And it also funds lawsuits?
It can. It reimburses legal expenses incurred by members who are pursuing class action suits against companies, provided the tribunal sanctions the reimbursement.
And given the sheer size and importance of this fund, its administration must be tightly controlled.
Oh, it is. The IEPF authority manages it, and the Secretary of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is the ex officio chairperson. And critically, its accounts are audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, or CAG, ensuring rigorous oversight and annual reporting to Parliament.
Before we discuss the final penalties, let's address a temporary holding pattern. Keeping rights in abeyance under Section 126. This relates back to our earlier discussion on share transfers that are pending formal registration.
Right. When a share transfer instrument is delivered, but the company hasn't yet updated its register of members, the company has to manage the rights attached to those shares very carefully. There are two immediate requirements to prevent the wrong party from benefiting.
And the first is handling the dividend payout itself.
The dividend related to those shares must be transferred immediately to the unpaid dividend account, UDA. This is the mandatory safeguard, ensuring the cash is protected until ownership is definitively settled.
Is there any way around that?
The only way around it is if the previously registered holder provides written authorization to pay the dividend directly to the transferee, the purchaser.
And the second rule is about preventing any capital restructuring benefit from going astray.
Correct. Any future capital rights, specifically, any offer of rights shares under Section 62 and the issue of fully paid-up bonus shares must be kept in abeyance pending the final registration of the share transfer. They essentially freeze all future corporate actions on that specific block of shares until the ambiguity of ownership is cleared up.
Okay, now for the severe enforcement mechanism. Punishment for failure to distribute dividend in 30 days, Section 127. This really outlines why those 30 days are a non-negotiable deadline.
This is where the law uses the heaviest penalties to ensure compliance. If a company fails to pay the declared dividend or post the warrant within that mandated 30-day window, both the company and the directors face severe consequences. It reflects the seriousness of withholding cash that is owed to shareholders.
Let's detail the punishment for the directors, because it includes criminal liability.
It does. Every director who is knowingly a party to the default faces imprisonment up to 2 years.
2 years in prison.
And a minimum fine of 1,000 rupees for every day the default continues. That imposition of criminal liability potential jail time is the clearest indicator of how seriously the law views the director's fiduciary duty to ensure the timely payment of shareholder entitlements.
And the company's financial penalty.
The company itself is liable to pay simple interest at the punitive rate of 18% per annum for the entire period of default.
I want to clarify that 18% rate using descriptive question 1 from the sources. If a shareholder tries to sue the company claiming, say, 20% interest on the delayed payment, will they succeed?
They will not. The company's statutory liability for delayed payment is fixed at simple interest of 18% per annum under Section 127. No matter what rate the shareholder demands, the company is only legally liable for that statutory maximum during the default period.
Now, the law does acknowledge that non-payment isn't always the company's fault. There are 5 specific, explicit exemptions where non-payment within 30 days does not attract this severe punishment.
These exemptions are essential because they distinguish willful default from legal or procedural complications.
What is the first situation that protects the company?
Where the non-payment was due to the operation of any law. Descriptive question 4 shows this clearly. If a court order restrained the payment due to a legal dispute over succession or ownership, the company is exempt from liability.
Because they were legally barred from making the payment.
Exactly.
The second relates to the shareholder providing faulty information.
This is the most crucial exemption regarding shareholder communication. The company is protected if the shareholder gave payment directions that could not be complied with, provided the company took the necessary step of communicating this failure back to the shareholder.
So if Mr. Kumar provides incorrect bank details, the payment bounces, and the company just puts the check in a drawer and does nothing, they're liable.
Absolutely. Descriptive question 7 confirms this. If the payment returns due to incorrect details, but the company fails to inform the shareholder of the discrepancy, the company is in default under Section 127. The protection only comes with proactive communication.
What are the remaining three exemptions?
Third, where there is an active dispute regarding the right to receive the dividend itself, such as a challenge to the transfer of shares.
Okay.
Fourth, where the dividend was lawfully adjusted against a debt owed by the shareholder to the company.
Let's illustrate that lawful adjustment using illustration 6. If Mr. Alok owes the company 80,000 rupees and call money unpaid capital on his shares, can the company withhold his dividend to cover that debt?
Yes. Lawfully adjusting the dividend payout against a sum due from the shareholder, like call money in arrears, is an explicit exemption under Section 127. It's a justified corporate action, and no penalty is attracted.
And the final catch-all exemption.
Where the failure to pay or post the warrant within 30 days was due to an unforeseen reason that was not due to any default on the company's part. This covers true, external, unavoidable circumstances.
Finally, we should just briefly reiterate the modification for NITIs regarding the Section 127 punishment.
Right. For those specific financial institutions, if the dividend payable is a small amount, 100 rupees or less, they avoid the severe penalty if they ensure the dividend declaration is announced in a local newspaper of wide circulation and displayed on the company notice board for at least 3 months. It just simplifies compliance for very minor payouts in their unique business structure.
We have dissected the legal anatomy of the dividend, starting with the board's recommendation and ending with the threat of imprisonment for directors. So let's synthesize the critical knowledge nuggets you've gained from this deep dive.
First, I think you have to remember the fundamental structural balance. The board sets the ceiling through its recommendation, and the shareholders formally declare the final dividend.
But the shareholders are legally powerless to increase the payout rate.
Exactly. This enshrines the board's fiduciary duty of financial prudence.
Second, the absolute constraints on the source of the funds. Dividends have to come from realized, auditable revenue profits with an absolute requirement to provide for depreciation first.
That's the law's primary defense against companies distributing paper wealth or eroding their capital base.
Third, that complex, four-part legal safety net of Rule 3.
It's a really restrictive obstacle course. It concerns the average rate, the 10% withdrawal limit, the loss set-off priority, and that 15% minimum reserve balance. It's all designed to stop management from financially damaging the company by trying to look solvent during a period of loss.
And finally, the strict chronological enforcement. 5 days to segregate the funds into a separate account, 30 days to pay it out.
And then that long 7-year period before the money and the corresponding shares are transferred to the Investor Education and Protection Fund, the IEPF, ensuring that unclaimed wealth is held in trust, not simply absorbed by the state.
And the severe penalties, 18% interest and potential director imprisonment, enforce this discipline.
The regulatory architecture we've explored today is incredibly tight. It requires realized profits, mandatory segregation of cash, and it punishes non-compliance severely. This legal framework around dividends is it's much more than simply rewarding investors.
It's a critical mechanism designed to protect the capital base of the company first and foremost.
Yes.
And that leaves us with this final provocative thought for you. If every step of the dividend payment process is so rigidly guarded by rules that prioritize the retention of capital, ensuring that depreciation is covered and reserve minimums are met, what does this tight regulation tell us about the ultimate priorities of corporate law? Is the system truly designed to maximize rewarding the investor? Or is its overriding fundamental commitment to ensuring the long-term structural stability and financial integrity of the corporation itself? Something to consider as you apply this knowledge to your own investment thinking.